Let us remain standing for the reading of the Gospel from Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. He left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James, Joseph, and Judas, and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor except in their hometown, and among their own kin and their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Then he went about among the villages teaching. He called the 12 and began to send them out two by two, gave them authority over the unclean spirits. He ordered them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not to put on two tunics. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave the place. And if any place will not welcome you, and they refuse to hear you as you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them." So they went out and proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated.
Failure is a normal part of life. Anyone who has ever succeeded at anything has had to overcome numerous failures. So if you're afraid to share your faith or try to learn new skills because you think you might fail, it's obvious what you must do. Stay away from doing anything that you might fail at. Sure, success is not possible without failure, but isn't a life where you never do new things and never fail a kind of success in itself? So go ahead. Don't talk to people you don't know. Don't share your faith. Don't try for that better job or higher level of education. You are well on your way to never failing. Sure, you'll be a fearful coward with no real faith in God's plan for your life, but you won't be a failure. These have been Deep Thoughts from a Shallow Christian.
Well, do I have to explain that? No, I don't think. Sometimes it's more effective to say it that way, right? Than it is the other way. You're kind of like, huh? What are you talking about? You must be, oh, yes, you are. Okay. I want you to imagine with me the sights and sounds of that day. Little children scampering about, chatting excitedly with their friends, and ushers setting out extra chairs, anticipating a record-breaking worship attendance for this special occasion, and people bringing in covered dishes for the feast that will follow. The same philosophy probably prevailed in that day as it does today, and that is that unspoken philosophy that says, if you feed them, they will come. Yeah, okay. That always works. So they're all there, family, friends, other curious folks, all crowding into sanctuary to hear what this hometown boy who has gained the attention of the world might say that day. After an inspiring anthem or song by the choir, he gets up and he looks out over the crowd, and there's a brief pause before he speaks, and the entire room falls silent, waiting to hear, what is he going to say? What is he going to say? Maybe he'll do a little reminiscing, about the good old days. Maybe he'll talk about the annual town picnic, or homecoming, when all the politicians seeking office usually come riding the big parade, waving and smiling and talking about how bad things are, but how good they'll be when they get into office. Or maybe if they're in office, how bad things were before they got in office and how good things are now. Maybe he'll do that. It was during one of these picnics that a real VIP who later became the leader of the entire country was supposed to ride in the annual parade, make a speech, but somebody forgot to pick him up and he had to hitchhike into town. Everybody talked about that for a long time. Maybe the now young celebrity will mention the year that put their little town on the map, so to speak, the year that their football team went to state and won. Maybe he'll talk about that. Maybe he'll extol the virtues of a humble upbringing and maybe growing up in a small town and how that gave him the moral and spiritual bearings to navigate successfully through life. Maybe he'll talk about that. Well, as the young prophet speaks, the silence of anticipation turns to silence of shock and awe. This Jesus who stands before his former peers and family is much more than the hometown boy they remember. He looks like the Jesus they knew, but what he says about God and God's kingdom and the things that he does is just too startling. And at first they're drawn into the power of his words and the depth of the truth that they convey. Wow, we had no idea he was this good. Where in the world did he learn all this stuff? It's so overwhelming. However, in the next breath, they begin to question. And they say, "Now, wait a minute. Wait just a minute. He can't be anybody that special." You know that saying the post office had years ago, and it's a pretty reasonable saying. Maybe they just applied that here. You know, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. How in the world can he be something special? Because we know him. He's just a carpenter, Mary's kid. Look, there's his family sitting over there. Ask them, they'll tell you he's just an ordinary kid that grew up in an ordinary family. Something's way off base here. It's just not possible that somebody we've known all our lives could be that good. Mark says that day in his home synagogue or home church, they took offense. The Greek word used here is scandalizo. I think the New Revised Standard translated as offense. I think the CEB said that maybe they tripped over something. It may sound familiar, and it should be, because this is where we get our word scandal. That word makes its way into our headlines. Maybe it seems too often. It could be somebody like the football great Tom Brady, what was dubbed the Deflategate. You remember that? You know? Okay. Or a political figure like New York State Senator Dean Skelos, who had numerous charges leveled against him and his son for wiretapping, money laundering. A scandal is something that usually involves unbecoming conduct that discredits or damages or more. Here in Mark, it becomes the breaking point of what people just can't seem to get beyond. Literally, that word scandalizo means a stumbling block or to take offense at something. As Eugene Peterson translates it, they tripped over what little they knew about him and fell sprawling, and they never got any further. You know, every time maybe they want to believe what Jesus is saying, they trip over the fact that, you know, he's come from a humble family, and this kid is a carpenter. These hometown folks are given the same chance or opportunity as anyone else to believe that Jesus is God's voice and presence to them. And Jesus opens the door for them to walk through, to become disciples, but they just can't get over who they think he is. How could they not see whom they were rejecting? You know, how could they let their familiarity with Jesus and his family become such a barrier to deeper faith? Before we become too tough on these folks, we may want to remember that familiarity can breed indifference anytime and anywhere. You know, when I was in college, I served a little church as fill-in or interim pastor in a beautiful little setting, a place called Birdseye, Indiana. Anybody ever heard of Birdseye? Okay. Teresa has, yeah. Not a very big place, a beautiful setting there, and part of what called the Lincoln Hills there. And just on the edge of town, there were some cliffs there that sported during the winter some of the most spectacular icicles that I have ever seen. I mean, a friend showed them to me, and I was just marveled because they went from the top of the cliffs all the way down to the ravine floor. We're talking about 30, 40, 50, maybe larger than that. Huge icicles with a deep blue hue to them, just absolutely beautiful. And you could actually walk up to them and you could hear water running through them. And it was just a sight to see. I'd never seen anything like that before. Well, I said to this friend, I said, wow, I bet there are crowds of people that come down here every winter just to see these beautiful icicles, these beautiful works of nature here. And he kind of chuckled and he said, you know, when I first moved here, got here, I thought the same thing. But he said, folks will tell you, he said, yeah, we know they're there. Yeah, years and years and years ago went there, but they don't go there anymore. They know they're there, but they never go and see them. You know, sometimes our familiarity can stand in the way of appreciating what may be right there before us. You know, yesterday was the 4th of July, and we celebrate with food and fireworks and other gatherings, don't we? And we should, because it's an important day in our history, in our country. We celebrate, as we should, the freedom of the brave men and women who sacrificed for generations to come. Well, why is it then, with all of that, with all the celebration with that over our freedom, when it comes time to vote, turnout is comparatively low? We celebrate our freedom like that, you know, like we did yesterday, but when it comes time to really have a chance to exercise freedom through vote, isn't it? Anywhere across this country, people just, you know, well, I voted before, you know, and my vote won't be missed anyway, so why vote? You know, sometimes our familiarity can stand in the way of fully appreciating the freedom to exercise what many in the world have never been able to do. To stand up, to be counted without fear of losing all that we have or even our lives. Sometimes familiarity can also affect our attitude and our passion for serving Christ through the church. You know, we may glance over to a newcomer and wonder why. You know, we've sang that song 10,000 times and they're actually acting like they're really into that. Why are they singing like that? You know what I mean? You ever done that? Seen somebody who's a newcomer and they're singing that song with great gusto and we're sitting over there? What are they getting so excited about? It's just a song. Right? Because it's familiar. We've done it before. What's there to be so worked up about? David Garland, a former New Testament teacher, Greek teacher of mine, raised provocative questions about the issue of being so close to something that we have a difficulty fully embracing it. He asked questions like, does familiarity with the stories of Jesus breed contempt? Has his story become humdrum? Have we lost our sense of awe? Does our fascination with the unfamiliar and exotic lead us to look for truth in what is new or different? There was an article in Christian Century by Wesleyan scholar Andrew Thompson, who wrote an article about the rise of Buddhism in America. And what he credits that as is simply the fascination with the unfamiliar. That's kind of what he said. Because Christianity has been here, has been predominant, and people have seen it. Well, we've heard the stories, and so let's try something new, something we're not familiar with. You know, I've heard all these stories, that kind of thing. What can they teach me now? What can the Scriptures teach me now? Whether or not we agree completely with what Garland says, I think we all know how easy it is to become desensitized to what we might see and experience on a frequent basis. It's like yesterday, Teresa and I were down in my hometown of Piggott for the 4th of July parade they have every year. And those of us who have been going for years, it's no big deal. They throw out candy, right? You know, okay, throw out candy. And this year they added some new things, but our granddaughter Riley was there, the one that lives in Texas, a 5-year-old, and she had never been to a parade like that before. And they were throwing out that candy, and she was, I mean, she was that excited. Oh, yeah. She was laughing like that, and we were laughing at her like, but, you know, what was familiar with us, you know, she was so excited about, you know. Of course, at her age, I'd been excited with somebody throwing candy out, too. And, yeah, a bag to put it in. You know what I'm talking about, don't you, folks? we can lose the substance of something, or we can fail to see the significance of it because it's so familiar to us. It's so familiar to us. Sometimes we may not see the blessings that God has blessed us with, we have around us every day, because we're so familiar with them. They're there, we just take them for granted, right? Young man I knew went on a summer camp experience, and it was called Extreme Camp. Now, what they meant by extreme is this day and time, if you go without electricity for about 36 hours, that's extreme, right? Well, they went camping out in this area that they had no electricity, no fans, no air conditioner. You know, they only had makeshift kind of tents. It was camping extreme for them. Well, you know, the weather, you know, we've been having a lot of rain. Well, they had no rain, and it turned off extremely, extremely hot. So humid that they had to cancel the rest of the camp. They only got to go about halfway through. Well, this young man gets home, and the first thing that he says to his mom and dad is this. He says, "Mom, Dad, we need to thank God every day for air conditioning." You know, something like that before he never thought about, right? Right. Because it was always there. You can see what happened in Jesus' hometown as a result of their response because of their lack of faith in Christ. In verse 5 it says, because of this, he could do no deed of power there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. Verse 5. That's literally what it says. It was those that chose to believe, that brought their sick and needed him. They were able to benefit from what others had missed. You know what a story this is in the New Testament. What are we to make of this incident? You know, if you look at it one way, it looks like Jesus actually failed. Gets serious, it gets real quiet. You know, as I thought about this, a vacation Bible school I went to as a kid, I kept hearing the song over and over, Jesus can do anything, anything, anything. Jesus can do anything but fail. And I thought, well, wait a minute. If you look at it one way, it looks like Jesus actually failed. You know, that's not a comfortable thought, is it? I mean, Mark even says that Jesus was amazed and surprised at the reception he received. What's even more puzzling here is that in the very next pericope or paragraph, here in Mark, he has Jesus calling the 12 disciples to go out and do the work he's doing. Now hold on here. If Jesus had such a rough time being accepted by his own family and others that knew him when he was preaching the gospel, then who in their right mind would want to go out and face a world that may even be more hostile and unbelieving? Who in their right mind would want to follow? Who wants to risk rejection, resistance? Who wants to risk failure? I mean, who wants to be a part of something that looks like it's going to fail? You know, this is one of those reality check passages. If we think that following Jesus is always going to be easy, then read the passage again. You will have successes, and you will have those times that it looks like you have failed. Not everybody is going to embrace the gospel with open hearts. Mark tells us they didn't always do that for Jesus, and they don't always do that for you. However, I love that word, however. However, when it seems that all else fails, don't give up. You heard me right. When it seems that all else fails, don't give up. Don't give in to a defeated spirit. And don't lose heart. Remember that Jesus succeeded because he went on with a mission that God had called him to. You see, it's about the big picture, folks. In our lives and in our church too. You don't let one little thing or one thing change everything, right? There's a bigger picture out there. And Jesus' bigger picture was about his mission. It wasn't about how one group might have decided they were going to react to him. It was about his mission. And that's why he called his disciples. He went on where he could make a difference. And in the end, failure is ultimately not about how someone chooses to respond to us, but it's about what we do next. Let me say that again. In the end, failure is ultimately not about how someone chooses to respond to us, but it's about what we do next. To succeed is to keep being Jesus' disciples. It's to keep telling the story of the gospel. It's to be faithful to the Lord no matter what. Now you notice that Mark does give us an update on how things go for those that Jesus sends out. He says, so they went out and they proclaimed that all should repent. They cast out a couple. No. They cast out many demons, Mark says, and anointed many who were sick and cured them. You see, Mark says despite setbacks, despite some unfavorable responses, the truth is you can make a difference. You can be a positive witness for Christ in the world. You know, we need that same kind of conviction today. Christ needs people who will risk sharing their faith, even if it means the possibility that some may not respond in a positive way. I am convinced that God can take what even may look like failure and use it for good in other ways. A powerful illustration of this is by the late Hugh Thompson. Commencement exercise at Emory University years ago down in Atlanta. He was from Atlanta. He was kind of a hometown boy, so to speak. Honorary degrees were being awarded and the recipients made the requisite speeches. As is often the case, the students chatted through the whole ceremony there in that big university. In fact, there was only one moment when they actually listened to what was going on at the front. It was when a man named Hugh Thompson was speaking. Thompson was probably the least educated man on the platform. He never finished college. He had joined the Army, and he had become a helicopter pilot. On March 16th, 1968, he was flying a routine patrol in Vietnam when he happened to fly over the village of Malay just as American troops under the command of Lieutenant William Cowley were slaughtering dozens of unarmed villagers, old men, women, and children. Thompson made a decision. He saw what was going on, and he set his helicopter down in between the troops and those villagers. And he had the gunner in there to train the guns on the troops to hold them back. And he actually took some of the folks in the village and he flew them to a safe place. Thompson's action saved dozens of people's lives that day. Now you would have thought that somebody would have said, you know what, but he was actually almost court-martialed for what he did. It was nearly 30 years later that he finally received the Soldier's Medal for his act of bravery. As he stood at the microphone at the graduation ceremony that day, the rowdy student body grew very still. And then Thompson talked about his faith and how his faith guided him on that day in the village. Simple words. Speaking of what his parents taught him when he was a child, Thompson said, "They always taught me, do unto others as you would have them do unto you." That's what he told that highly educated crowd there. Simple words. The students were amazed at these words of Jesus, words from Sunday school, words from worship, words of Christian testimony. Familiar words, aren't they? That day, they leapt to their feet and they gave him a standing ovation. Thompson's words about his faith had weight because he was actually a man who walked the talk, didn't he? He did. He lived by the principle that he'd been taught. Even though he didn't get accolades in the beginning, in the end, he was able to share what had happened in a positive way. You know, that's what our world needs from us as well. People who live out the gospel with integrity. People whose words are congruous with their deeds. What do you do when it seems that all else has failed? You keep on being his disciple, friends. You keep on serving with integrity. You keep on telling his story. Interesting how dictionaries change and new dictionaries come on. Did you know that God has a dictionary too? I don't know if you've ever seen God's dictionary. God has a dictionary. And sometimes in God's dictionaries there's alternate spellings of words. Let me tell you how God's dictionary spells the word success. Here's how it spells it. Faithfulness. Faithfulness. And the people of God